The ballroom lights in the hospital atrium glittered like a second ceiling of stars, and every person in a suit seemed to be smiling for a camera that was not even there. At the center of it all sat the billionaire's daughter, small in a white dress, hands folded, eyes wide and quiet like a locked room. They said she had been born deaf. They said her world had never held a single word. Then the janitor knelt beside her chair, tilted his head, and gently pulled something out of her ear that made the whole room gasp. The girl blinked, trembled, and turned toward the sound of her own father's breath. What they didn't know was the silence had been hiding a secret the entire building was built to protect. Before we continue, please like and subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Isaiah Cole was 29 years old, and he had learned two kinds of quiet in his life. The first kind was the quiet of early mornings, when the city still slept, and even the traffic lights seemed to blink softer. The second kind was the quiet that comes after people decide you are invisible. He wore a Navy janitor's uniform that never fit quite right at the shoulders because he had bought it used from a man who quit after 3 days. The name badge said Cole, but most people called him Hey, or You There. He worked nights at Briarstone Children's Center, a place so clean and bright that it looked like money had been polished into the walls. The lobby floors were marble. The elevators whispered. Even the flowers smelled expensive. Isaiah's private burden wasn't dramatic, at least not to anyone who had never had to choose between heat and groceries. His mother's medicine cost more than his rent. His community college tuition was overdue again, and he was still trying to finish a certification program that most people laughed at when they heard it. Audiology, hearing, sound. It sounded almost funny, a janitor studying hearing while mopping hallways. But Isaiah didn't choose it because it sounded clever. He chose it because of his little sister, Maya, who had been born with severe hearing loss. Growing up, Isaiah learned to watch mouths and eyebrows and the way hands could speak when voices could not. He learned sign language the way other kids learned basketball. When Maya cried as a baby, the mother would press her cheek to Maya's forehead and hum, believing that even if Maya couldn't hear the note, she could feel the love inside the vibration. Years later, Maya could read Isaiah's mood before he spoke. She could tell when he was tired, when he was scared, when he was proud, and she had once signed something to him that stuck in his mind like a promise. You don't fix ears, you fix lives. So Isaiah studied whenever he could. In the quiet supply closet during breaks, he watched lectures on his phone with cracked screen. At home, he practiced with a cheap flashlight and a plastic ear model he bought online. He repaired old radios as a hobby, taking them apart to understand how sound could travel through wires and air and still arrive as music. It was his private passion, the kind that made him feel like he was building something instead of just surviving. And he carried one small tool everywhere, even at work, because it reminded him that his life was more than a mop bucket. A penlight with a clip, small and silver. It mattered later. Briarstone had its own rhythm at night. Nurses moved like soft storms, quick and focused. Machines beeped with steady patience. Parents slept in chairs, waking every hour like their hearts were alarm clocks. Isaiah cleaned around them carefully, never shaking a trash bag too loud, never snapping a paper towel roll too hard. He had habits that kept him safe. He wrote down his rounds in a small notebook, with times and hallways, because once a nurse accused him of missing a spill that had never existed. The notebook saved his job. He also paid attention to details the way people did when they could not afford mistakes. On the 3rd floor, there was a hallway camera with a small red light that blinked every few seconds. On the 1st floor, the supply closet door didn't latch unless you lifted it slightly. In the basement, the renovation team stored boxes labeled ear protection in thick black marker. Blue foam earplugs, dozens of them, for the men drilling walls and polishing floors in the new donor wing. And 2 weeks before the gala, Isaiah had seen something else. A printed notice left on the copier near the administrative offices. A recall. A batch number. Disposable probe tips used for newborn hearing screening. A small piece of equipment that should never break, and yet had been reported to crack if handled roughly. Isaiah didn't take it. He didn't photograph it. He just read it, felt uneasy, and watched the director's assistant snatch it up, like it was a napkin someone left on the floor. Dr. Leonard Shaw ran Briarstone like a man who believed the building itself was his reflection. His suits were always perfect. His smile was always practiced. He spoke softly but made people hurry. Around donors and press, he carried himself like a champion of children. Around staff, he carried himself like a judge. He rarely noticed Isaiah unless something went wrong. That week, something big was happening. Briarstone was hosting a fundraising gala inside the atrium, an event so polished it felt like a movie set. Golden lights, a string quartet, a silent auction with items that made Isaiah's stomach twist when he saw the prices. And there was one guest who made everyone stand taller. Elliot Vance, billionaire, investor, the kind of man whose name made board members sweat. He arrived with a calm face and tired eyes, wearing a watch that could probably pay Isaiah's mother's hospital bill for a year. Elliot's daughter, Lila Vance, was 6 years old, and she was the reason the gala existed. They said Lila had been born deaf. Completely. They said the best doctors had tried everything. They said no device, no therapy, no miracle had changed her world. Elliot had poured money into hearing research, into children's programs, into entire wings of hospitals, and still his daughter lived in a silent bubble. The story had become Briarstone's crown jewel, the tragedy that opened wallets, the pain that turned into donations. Isaiah had seen Lila before in passing, always with a caretaker, always in soft clothing, always with eyes that watched everything. She didn't speak. She didn't respond to voices. But Isaiah had noticed something small that bothered him. Sometimes, when a door slammed down the hall, Lila would flinch. And sometimes, when a rolling cart hit a bump, she would look toward it. Isaiah told himself it was coincidence. Vibrations, air movement, anything but hope. Hope was dangerous when you didn't have permission to feel it. On the night of the gala, the atrium was transformed. Isaiah had been assigned to standby, which meant he waited near the back with a mop and a cloth, ready to erase any evidence that rich people could spill. He kept his shoulders low, his eyes down, moving only when needed. That's when he saw Lila up close. She sat near the front, beside her father's table. Her caretaker stood behind her chair, hand resting lightly on the handle like it was a leash. Lila's hair was pinned with a small pearl clip. Her cheeks were pale under the lights, and she kept touching her left ear, rubbing the outer edge like something itched or hurt. Isaiah noticed, because he noticed pain the way other people notice jewelry. A waiter dropped a tray somewhere across the room. It clattered, loud enough that several guests laughed and turned. Lila's shoulders jerked, not just a startle from vibration. It looked like a reaction to sound. Isaiah's heart tightened. He stepped closer, careful, polite, stopping at a respectful distance. He didn't want to be the janitor who bothered the billionaire's table. Lila's caretaker glanced at him with sharp eyes. "Yes," she said, the word cutting. Isaiah kept his voice quiet. "Ma'am, is she okay?" "Her ear. She keeps rubbing it." The caretaker's mouth tightened. "She's fine. Do your job." Isaiah nodded. He took a step back. Then Lila turned her face toward him and stared. Her gaze wasn't empty. It wasn't lost. It was focused, curious, almost searching. Isaiah had seen that look on Maya's face when Maya tried to read a new word on someone's lips. Without thinking, Isaiah lifted his hands slightly and signed, simple and gentle. "Are you hurting?" Lila's eyes widened. Her caretaker snapped. "Don't do that." Isaiah froze. He lowered his hands. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." A shadow fell across them. Dr. Leonard Shaw stood there, smiling like a knife wrapped in silk. "What's going on here?" he asked, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Heads turned, faces angled. Curiosity gathered like smoke. Isaiah's mouth went dry. "Nothing, sir. I just noticed." "You noticed?" Dr. Shaw repeated, voice dripping with disbelief. "You noticed something at Mr. Vance's table." Elliot Vance looked up, not angry, just exhausted, like he had been asked one more question than his body could carry. Isaiah swallowed. She's been rubbing her ear, sir. It might be bothering her. I thought a nurse should. Dr. Shaw laughed softly, the way powerful people laughed when they wanted the room to join them. Mr. Cole, is it? Do you have a medical degree hidden in that mop bucket? Some people chuckled, not loudly, uncomfortably, like they didn't know if they were allowed to laugh, but didn't want to risk being the only one silent. Isaiah kept his posture steady, even as heat rose up his neck. No, sir. I'm studying audiology. I have family. You're studying, Dr. Shaw cut in, eyes narrowing. And tonight you decided to practice on the most important donor in this building. Isaiah shook his head. That's not what I'm doing. I just think someone should look in her ear. She seems like she's in pain. The caretaker crossed her arms, glare hard. She's deaf. She doesn't react to sound. She doesn't need a janitor making a scene. Isaiah's chest tightened again. Deafness did not cancel pain. It did not make people less human. It did not erase discomfort. But he knew what was happening. This wasn't about Lila's ear. This was about where Isaiah belonged. A proverb his mother used to whisper came back to him, and it landed heavy in his bones. A broom in your hand does not mean dust in your heart. Dr. Shaw leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal. Step away from the table. Now, Isaiah could have obeyed and disappeared, like he was trained to do. He could have walked back to his corner and let the lights keep glittering over the child's quiet face. But then Lila flinched again, sharp and small, and her fingers pressed against her ear like she was trying to push something out. Isaiah spoke calmly. Sir, just let a nurse check. 30 seconds. Dr. Shaw's smile vanished. His fragile ego showed itself in a quick, ugly flash. Security, he called out louder now. We have an employee interfering with a patient and harassing a donor's family. The word harassing hit the air like a stone. Isaiah felt the room tilt. He felt eyes on him, and in those eyes, he saw what people often saw when a man like him stood too close to wealth. A threat, a problem, a mistake. A security officer approached, tall and broad-shouldered, his face careful, like he didn't want to be here either. His badge read Malik Grant. Isaiah had seen him on nights, polite, quiet, always greeting the cleaning staff with a nod. Malik looked at Isaiah, then at Dr. Shaw, then at Elliot Vance. The whole triangle felt dangerous. Sir, Malik said to Isaiah gently, come with me. Isaiah's hands tightened around the handle of his mop. His notebook was in his pocket, his penlight clipped inside his shirt. He could feel his job slipping away. Elliot Vance stood slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room leaned toward him automatically. What's the issue? Elliot asked. Dr. Shaw's tone switched instantly, becoming smooth again. A staff member got too close, sir. We're handling it. Isaiah's heart hammered. This was the impossible choice. Submit and lose everything, or resist and look guilty. He took a breath and spoke to Elliot. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. Mr. Vance, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. Your daughter's been rubbing her ear all night. I think something might be inside. If I'm wrong, I'll walk out right now and you'll never see me again. But if I'm right, she shouldn't have to sit through pain because of a title. Silence spread across the atrium. Even the string quartet seemed to soften. Elliot's jaw clenched. His eyes moved to Lila. Lila was still rubbing her ear. The caretaker whispered, she's always like that sometimes. It's nothing. Isaiah watched Elliot's face change. Not into anger, into something sharper. A father's fear. A nurse, Elliot said. Now, Dr. Shaw hesitated, and in that hesitation, Isaiah saw the truth. The director didn't want anyone looking too closely. Not tonight. Not in front of donors. Not in front of cameras. A young nurse approached, uncertain. Her name tag read Nina Reyes. Isaiah recognized her. She had once thanked him for cleaning quietly while her patient slept. Nina looked at Dr. Shaw, waiting for permission. Dr. Shaw's voice tightened. Mr. Vance, with respect, your daughter has been evaluated by the best specialists. A janitor's suggestion is not. Check her ear, Elliot said again, calm but final. Nina stepped closer, but she didn't have the right tool. She glanced around, embarrassed. "I need an otoscope," she murmured. Isaiah's fingers touched the pen light clipped inside his shirt. Not an otoscope, but light. He didn't pull it out. He didn't want to look like he was playing doctor. Instead, he said quietly to Nina, "There's an exam room down the hall. I can show you. Cameras in that corridor. Everything's recorded." That planted detail, the camera with the red blinking light, suddenly mattered. Isaiah wanted proof that he wasn't doing anything wrong. He wanted accountability in a room that ran on appearances. Dr. Shaw's face darkened. "Absolutely not. We're not parading the Vance family through hallways because of this." Elliot looked at him, and something in Elliot's gaze made people step back. "You're worried about parading," he said softly. "I'm worried about my child." The room held its breath. That was when Dr. Mara Klein walked into the atrium. She wasn't dressed for the gala. No glitter, no necklace, just a simple blazer and a medical badge. She looked like a woman who had spent her life choosing truth over comfort. Elliot's lawyer followed behind her, holding a folder. Dr. Shaw's posture stiffened. "Dr. Klein," he said, smile forced. "What a surprise." Elliot spoke first. "Mara, can you check her?" "Now." Dr. Klein didn't ask questions. She moved directly to Lila, knelt, and spoke to her gently. Her voice was warm, even if Lila couldn't hear it. Nina rushed to bring an otoscope from a nearby station. Dr. Klein took it, precise and calm, and tilted Lila's head slightly. Isaiah stood back, hands visible, doing everything he could to look harmless in a room that had already decided he was not. Dr. Shaw tried one last time. "This is unnecessary. You're creating a spectacle." Dr. Klein didn't even look up. "If there is pain, it's necessary." She peered into Lila's ear for a long moment. Her expression shifted, not into shock, into focus. "There's a foreign object," she said. The words fell like a hammer. The caretaker stiffened. "That's impossible." Dr. Klein held out her gloved hand, and Nina placed a small instrument into it. Dr. Klein worked carefully, professionally, without drama, and then she pulled something out. It was small, white, shaped like a tiny cone. A disposable probe tip, the kind used in newborn hearing screening. A hush swept the room, so complete Isaiah could hear his own heartbeat. Dr. Klein held it up, so Nina could see, so Elliot could see, so Dr. Shaw could see. And then Lila did something no one expected. She startled. Her eyes darted toward the clink of metal as Nina set a tray down. Not a flinch from vibration, a turn toward sound. Lila's mouth opened slightly, like she was stepping into air she had never breathed before. Elliot leaned forward, voice cracking. "Lila." Lila blinked, and her lips formed a shaky word, barely louder than a whisper. "Daddy." It wasn't a perfect word. It wasn't a speech. It was a single, trembling sound, but it hit the room like thunder. Elliot's face collapsed, grief and joy mixing so hard it looked painful. He covered his mouth with his hand, eyes wet, shoulders shaking with a kind of relief that didn't know how to be quiet. People around them gasped. Someone near the back started to cry. Phones lifted, then lowered again as if the moment itself demanded respect. Isaiah felt his knees weaken, not because he wanted credit, because he understood what 6 years of silence meant. He understood what a single word could save. Dr. Shaw's face went pale. Dr. Klein looked up at him now, her voice steady. "This probe tip has a batch marking," she said. "It should never be here." Elliot's lawyer opened the folder. "We should talk about that batch marking," he said, voice cold. A woman stepped forward from the edge of the room, someone Isaiah recognized from daytime meetings. Evelyn Park, the hospital's compliance auditor. She held an envelope like it weighed more than paper. "I was scheduled to speak with the board tomorrow morning," Evelyn said. "But given what just happened, I think the timing has changed." Dr. Shaw tried to smile again, but it didn't work. "Evelyn, let's not." Evelyn's gaze didn't soften. A recall notice was issued weeks ago for defective disposable probe tips. It was routed to administration. It was flagged for immediate action. It was signed as received. She looked at Dr. Shaw, and then it was ignored. A ripple ran through the donors, like wind through tall grass. Whispering began, fast and sharp. Nina's eyes widened, and Isaiah saw her discomfort deepen into something braver. Dr. Shaw's voice tightened. "This is not the place." Elliot turned toward him slowly. The billionaire's calm had disappeared. What remained was a father with a shattered trust. "My daughter has been labeled deaf since birth," Elliot said, each word controlled. "You built a campaign around that. You let your staff tell me the case was hopeless. You let me donate millions to a story that might have been wrong." Dr. Klein spoke carefully. "We don't know the full timeline yet, but this object could have been present for a long time. It could have distorted tests. It could have caused pain. It absolutely should have been found in a routine ear exam." Nina swallowed hard. Then she spoke, voice shaking but clear. "We were told not to question the original diagnosis," she admitted. "We were told the Vance case was sensitive, that it had been handled." Dr. Shaw's eyes snapped to her, warning. Nina's stance changed in that instant, complicit to uncomfortable to choosing truth. "But we should have checked," she continued. "We should have looked. We should have treated her like patient, not a headline." Malik, the security officer, stepped closer to Isaiah and spoke quietly, almost ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said under his breath. "I shouldn't have let them frame you like that." Isaiah didn't respond with anger. He just nodded once, because he knew what it meant for a man in Malik's position to admit that in front of powerful people. Evelyn Park lifted her envelope. "There's more," she said. "Tonight, the corridor cameras were reviewed when Dr. Shaw requested security intervention. Mr. Cole was in full view of the cameras the entire time. He did not touch the child. He did not approach without witnesses. His actions were documented." Isaiah felt his notebook in his pocket like a heartbeat. His habit, his proof. "And," Evelyn added, "there's footage from earlier this week of Dr. Shaw's office assistant shredding recall documents." Dr. Shaw's mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time, he looked small. Elliot's lawyer said, "Board members are here tonight. They've seen what happened. They've heard the auditor. And they've watched you attempt to remove a staff member for expressing concern about a child in pain." The room had turned. The scattered support was no longer scattered. A donor near the front stood up and said quietly, "This is unacceptable." Another murmured, "We're pulling our pledge." A third, louder, said, "Get him away from his family." Dr. Shaw looked around, trying to find an ally, but the allies were stepping back like he carried a stain. Security arrived again, not to escort Isaiah, but to escort Dr. Shaw. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no wrestling, just the slow collapse of a man's image under the weight of undeniable truth. As Dr. Shaw was guided away, he tried to speak to Elliot. "Mr. Vance, please. Let's handle this privately." Elliot didn't raise his voice. "You had 6 years," he said. "You chose your image." Dr. Klein stayed beside Lila, speaking softly, explaining next steps with careful honesty. There would be tests, therapy, time. No promises of perfect hearing overnight. But there was hope now, and it was real, not manufactured. Isaiah stood at the edge of the moment, still in his janitor uniform, still holding a mop that felt like a symbol in someone else's story. He didn't step forward to claim anything. He didn't smile for the cameras. He just watched Lila's eyes, how they moved toward sounds now, how her face changed when the world finally answered her. Elliot approached Isaiah after things calmed, his eyes red but steady. "What's your name?" Elliot asked. Isaiah's throat tightened. "Isaiah Cole, sir." Elliot nodded once, like he was making sure the name stayed in his memory. "You saw what everyone else missed." Isaiah shook his head. I pay attention. My sister is deaf. I learned to notice, and she looked like she was hurting." Elliot's voice softened. "You stood up in a room full of people who wanted you quiet." Isaiah didn't know what to say, so he told the truth. "My mother always said a quiet room can hide the loudest lies. I didn't want her to suffer quietly." Elliot looked back at Lila, then at Isaiah again. "What do you want to do with your life, Isaiah?" Isaiah hesitated. Saying dreams out loud in front of wealth felt like touching fire. But he said it anyway. I want to finish my program. I want to work in hearing care. I want to help families like mine. Elliot nodded again. Then you will. The next days moved fast, but not magically. Investigations started. Board meetings happened. Lawyers asked hard questions. The hospital released careful statements. Dr. Klein arranged proper evaluations for Lila, and the truth unfolded piece by piece, the way truth often does, slowly, painfully, and then all at once. There were consequences, real ones. Dr. Shaw lost his position. The board demanded reforms. The recall process was rewritten. Mandatory ear exams became policy. Staff were trained to speak up even when a case carried a famous name. And Isaiah, the janitor who had been called a spectacle, received a letter on thick paper. A scholarship. Full tuition coverage for his audiology certification and beyond. Backed by the Vance Family Foundation. Newly restructured with independent oversight, so it could never be used as a stage again. He also received a job offer from Briarstone, not as a reward handed like charity, but as a position earned. Patient support technician in the hearing clinic, under supervision, with training and proper credentials, because Isaiah didn't want shortcuts. He wanted to do it right. Nina Reyes wrote him a recommendation, too. Her words simple and sincere. Malik Grant apologized to him again, this time without lowering his voice, because some apologies need witnesses to become real. And on a quiet afternoon, weeks later, Isaiah saw Lila again in the hallway. She wore a small set of soft hearing devices now, fitted carefully, her therapy ongoing. She wasn't suddenly a different child. She was still Lila, still gentle, still cautious. But when Isaiah waved, she smiled. Then she lifted her hand and signed, slow and clumsy, but clear enough to make Isaiah's eyes sting. Thank you. Isaiah signed back, and his hands didn't shake. You're brave. There are people who believe dignity comes from titles, from suits, from gold lights and polished speeches. But that night proved something older and truer. Dignity comes from character, especially when no one is clapping. Dignity is what you do when it would be easier to stay invisible. Here's the takeaway that stayed with everyone who saw it. A person's value is not measured by their uniform, but by their courage. Another truth followed close behind. The powerful can control a room, but they cannot control reality forever. And maybe the simplest proverb of all rose out of that marble atrium like a promise. The hands that clean the floor can still lift a life. Isaiah didn't become a hero in the headlines, and he didn't need to. He became something better. He became proof that paying attention is a form of love, and that standing calmly in the face of shame can change a child's entire world. If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell me what part hit you the most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.